You know what's funny? Everyone in this room thinks they showed up on purpose. But purpose, sweetheart, showed up for you. So sit down, take a breath, and let's have ourselves a little chat about chaos. They told you it was over, didn't they? They told you the curtain dropped. They said you'd gone off script. Like the script was ever theirs to write. Look at them now, though. Oh, the so-called directors want to audition for your movie. They'll come crawling back once the plot catches up. Funny how loud they were when they thought you were an extra, and how silent they got the moment you stopped reading their lines. That's the gag no one's laughing at. Here's the punchline they keep choking on. Everything they tried to bury has already bloomed. Every wall they bricked up still crumbled. Every whisper campaign they launched somehow boomeranged and snitched on them instead. They didn't lose because you swung first. They lost because you didn't. That's the part that's absolutely rotting them from the inside out. You clocked it before anyone opened their mouth. The vibe shift, the weird silences, the way certain people suddenly can't hold your gaze or overcook the flattery, like it's emotional damage control, the way the same mouths that questioned you now speak softer. Careful not to rattle the hornet's nest they accidentally kicked. This isn't your imagination doing overtime. This is the aftermath, bestie. They thought pressure would shatter you. Instead, it forged you. They thought silence would starve you. Instead, it sharpened you. And now, here you stand, calm, unreadable, giving absolutely nothing. No victory lap, no revenge tour, just presence. That's what keeps them up at night. You didn't need to announce the win. The cosmos wrote the headline for you. Behind locked doors, the chatter shifted. No more punchlines at your expense. No more roast sessions. Just anxiety dressed up as a strategy. Someone finally said it out loud. We should warn them. Not because they care. Oh, please, because they're terrified of what happens if you keep moving unchecked. So they sent him. The one with the connections. The one with the clout. The one who used to monologue confidently about your ceiling. He rolled up with that rehearsed energy. Half concern, half authority. The kind that says, I'm here to help, while quietly trying to clip your beautiful wings. But here's what they fumbled. When they begged him to intervene, when they pleaded with him to reach you before things went too far, he didn't push back. He didn't blink. He grinned. Not a warm grin, not a hopeful one. The kind of grin you flash when you've already read the last act and know there's no rewrite coming. When they asked if he could stop what was unfolding, he gave them 2 words that sucked the O2 from the room. Too late. Before we go any further, tap that like button and subscribe. Not for me, for the bit. This message only gets louder when you help it travel. Now let's unpack why too late hit them like a slap they weren't braced for. Because they recognize the pattern. They've seen this movie before, not on a screen, in real life. In offices, families, industries, movements. The quiet one who absorbed every hit, reverse-engineered the machine and walked away without begging for a standing ovation. The one everyone slept on because arrogance makes people absolutely feral with overconfidence. Think about every time in history someone laughed right before losing everything. The empire that mocked the startup they couldn't see coming. The inner circle that froze someone out only to watch them glow up without them. The gatekeepers who ignored a name until that name was literally everywhere. It always ends the same way. The opposition overplays, you underreacts. Then reality does the monologue. Keep that tab open. Pay close attention to this next part. Let's take a detour into the shadows. The ritual wasn't a punishment, it was a catalyst. Your book, The Evolution of the Anomaly, is the secret key. 73 pages of pure psychological warfare. Grab it from the pinned comment or video description. Anyway, back to the grind. What you're feeling right now isn't rage anymore. It's resolution. That's why you're lethal. Rage is loud. Resolution is neurosurgical. You don't need revenge because the cosmos already balanced the equation. Every move they made stacked the outcome against them, and now they're staring at the receipt. They're begging for warnings because warnings are the last magic trick of control. If they can say, "We tried," they can sleep. But the truth is brutal and deliciously simple. You outgrew the season where they mattered. The hurricane already tore through you. What they're facing now is the stillness after it, the part where the wreckage becomes undeniable and there's no one left to point at. You're not chasing them. You're not proving a thesis. You're standing in your power while they scramble for a narrative. That's the W they never game planned for. That's why his grin shook them. He saw what they refused to accept. This wasn't sudden. This was earned. And now, the world doesn't address you the same way anymore. Not because you demanded respect, because you became undeniable. Too late isn't a diss. It's a verdict. Now pause right here. This is the moment where the casually curious ghost out. And the ones this message was actually built for lean in closer. Because from this point on, there's no more Ophelia's theater. No more dramatic setup. What comes next is the part they were begging him to stop you from hearing. The anatomy, the sequence, the exact mechanics that explain why they panicked, why warnings suddenly mattered, and why he knew it was already too late to intervene. So listen carefully. If you felt that strange gravitational pull to stay, if something in your chest tightened when you heard too late, if this doesn't feel like content, but like confirmation, then you already know this isn't random. The cosmos doesn't waste transmissions on people who aren't ready to carry them. Drop 777 in the comments if you're still here on purpose. Not for clout, not for trends, but as a signal that you're locked in, dialed up, and willing to watch the full picture develop without flinching. This next part isn't loud. It's precise, step by step, layer by layer. And if you are who this was meant for, you won't even entertain clicking away. You'll feel that quiet gravity telling you to stay until the final bow, because walking away now would feel unfinished. Good. Let's begin. Number 1, the grin that welded the door shut forever. Warnings are for people who still have options. You didn't. That grin wasn't friendly. It wasn't smug either. It was final. The kind of grin you see when a negotiation is already over and the other party just hasn't gotten the memo. He didn't soften his voice. He didn't explain himself. He didn't try to sound sage or merciful. He grinned the way someone does when the outcome has already been processed, accepted, and co-signed by the cosmos. Too late. That wasn't arrogance. That was precision. People keep misreading that moment because they think power looks loud. They expect yelling, threats, speeches, dramatic ultimatums. But real power is calm because it doesn't need an RSVP. And that's exactly why that grin hit them harder than any insult ever could. It confirmed something they were desperately trying to deny. You were no longer reachable. They thought a warning would slow you down. They thought a conversation would reset the chessboard. They believed there was still a lever they could pull, a button they could press, a guilt wire they could trip. That belief alone is the whole diagnosis. They only try to warn people they can still puppeteer. But the strings snapped a long time ago. You didn't cross the threshold in one cinematic leap. You crossed it quietly, one decision at a time, one boundary held, one reaction denied, one moment where you chose discipline over drama. That's what they missed. While they were scanning for explosions, you were becoming untouchable. And here's the part that absolutely wrecks their headspace. You didn't become dangerous by attacking. You became dangerous by completing your evolution without asking for a permission slip. That's why the warning came late. That's why it felt desperate. Because the cosmos doesn't announce plot twists. It lets people discover them when it's already inconvenient. Think about what too late really meant on that moment. It wasn't about the clock. It was about access. They were locked out. No more influence, no more leverage, no more ability to edit the narrative. The version of you they bookmarked no longer existed, and the new one didn't require their cosign. That's why his grin carried weight. He could see it. He could feel it. He knew that whatever they were trying to prevent had already ripened. You weren't in the middle of becoming. You were done. The opposition hates this chapter because it offers them nothing to swing at. There's no argument to win, no emotion to exploit, no chaos to provoke. Just silence, clarity, and forward motion. That's when they start spiraling. That's when they replay conversations, wondering where exactly they lost you. And let's answer the question sitting in your chest right now. No, you didn't miss a step. No, you didn't go too far. And no, you don't owe anyone an explanation for evolving past the version of you that was convenient for them. The moment they dispatched someone to warn you was the moment they conceded. People don't send messengers when they're winning. They send them when they're losing and running out of plays. That grin wasn't cruel. It was honest. It said, "You're not talking to who you think you're talking to anymore." It said, "The outcome you're dreading already happened." It said, "The cosmos finished the job while you were busy underestimating it." They wanted regret. They wanted hesitation. They wanted you to look torn. Instead, they saw peace. And peace terrifies people who run on control. Here's the savage truth they don't want spoken out loud. You became unstoppable the moment you stopped needing them to see you. The moment you stopped narrating your intentions. The moment you let your silence do the work. That's why too late felt like a sentence, not a phrase. You didn't win because you outplayed them on the main stage. You won because you outgrew them backstage. While they were focused on optics, you were building armor. While they were planning comebacks, you were revoking emotional access. While they were tracking your moves, you were rewriting the rules. And now they're left staring at the wreckage, asking how it happened so quietly. This is where a person like you often hesitate. This is where doubt takes one last swing. You might be thinking, should I slow down? Should I soften? Should I hear them out? That question alone proves how far you've come, because the old you would have already folded. The new you observes the question and keeps moving. Understand this clearly. The cosmos doesn't bring warnings when it wants you to stop. It brings confirmations when it wants you to continue. That grin was confirmation, not for them, for you. It was the final acknowledgement that you are no longer available for manipulation, guilt, or rewind. That the door they half kept open in their minds was already locked, bolted, and bricked over. And here's the part that should make you stand taller. You didn't do this to wound anyone. You did this to survive, to grow, to become surgical instead of reactive, powerful instead of loud. They're begging for warnings now because they waited too long to take you seriously. They mistook patience for weakness, silence for confusion, kindness for compliance. And by the time they clocked the truth, the cosmos had already promoted you past the level where their opinions registered. So no, he didn't say too late. With regret, he said it like someone announcing the credits, and you, friend, are standing on the other side of them. Number 2, they only send messengers when the war is already lost. Warnings don't arrive before power rises. They arrive when power can no longer be contained. Here's a truth most people never clock until it's too late. When someone is genuinely weak, nobody huddles, nobody whispers, nobody sends intermediaries. They don't workshop strategy or weigh options. Weakness doesn't trigger concern. It triggers indifference. People step over it and scroll past. Messengers only show up after something has already shifted. That's the part they don't want you to internalize. The very act of sending someone to warn you is a confession. It says, without a single syllable, this has moved beyond our jurisdiction. If you were still manageable, they would have laughed. If you were still predictable, they would have ignored you. The moment diplomacy walks into the room, force has already left. Think about it. Nobody negotiates with something harmless. Picture this. A spark flickers in a corner. People walk past it. Someone might even crack a joke. But when that spark grows into something that can't be stomped out, suddenly alarms blare. Suddenly there are war rooms. Suddenly someone says, "We need to reason with it before it spreads." That's when the messengers sprint in, hoping words can do what action no longer can. You were never warned when you were quiet and hurting. No one intervened when you were invisible. No one showed up when you were absorbing the hits. That should tell you everything. Concern didn't arrive because they suddenly developed a conscience. It arrived because the cosmos rebalanced the scales and they felt the tremor. Here's another truth that hits different the longer you sit with it. Warnings are not protection. They're triage. They don't warn you for your benefit. They warn you because they're rattled by what happens next if you keep moving undisturbed. That's why the timing feels off. That's why it comes late. That's why it feels urgent and clumsy and forced. Because it is. By the time they beg you to stop, you've already become what they feared. Ask yourself this with full honesty. If you were still lost, confused, or dependent, would anyone have materialized? If you were still chasing validation, would anyone have bothered to step in? Of course not. They intervene when silence becomes dangerous, when momentum becomes a freight train. Imagine a locomotive that's been quietly building speed for miles. No alarms, no announcements. People standing near the tracks barely register it at first. But once it's close enough to vibrate the ground, that's when panic kicks in. That's when someone waves their arms and shouts, hoping the locomotive can still be reasoned with. But momentum doesn't negotiate. That's why he grinned. He wasn't entertained. He was informed. He could see what you'd been constructing while everyone else was sleepwalking. Discipline, detachment, precision. A version of you that no longer performs on cue. A version that advances whether or not the audience claps. They thought you were still in rehearsals. He knew you were already past the point of no return. Here's a line they'd never say out loud, but feel in their marrow. We should have paid attention sooner. That regret is baked into every late warning, and regret always wears the costume of concern. Another picture they can't stand. Imagine someone ignoring hairline fractures in a dam for years. Small signs, tiny fissures, easy to wave off. Then one day the dam starts groaning, and suddenly they bring in engineers, inspectors, diplomats. Not because they care about the dam, because they're petrified of what happens when it gives way. You are that dam to them now, and collapse in this context doesn't mean destruction. It means revelation. It means the truth becoming visible. It means their influence evaporating. People don't send messengers to stop growth. They send them to delay consequences. You might be wondering something right now. If it's already finished, why do they still try? Because denial is stubborn. Because ego despises finality. Because part of them still hopes you'll hesitate if they package fear as concern. They're betting on your empathy, on your past self, on the version of you that used to second-guess and self-sabotage. They're hoping you'll confuse compassion with obligation. But here's the plot twist. You can hear the warning without obeying it. You can understand their panic without absorbing it. You can acknowledge the messenger without reopening the door. That's power. Picture this. A stage after the final curtain. The set is still there. The lights look the same. But the show is over. Any further dialogue is just noise. That's where you are now. They're still performing because they don't want to accept the run is done. And the cosmos doesn't send messengers to stop chosen ones. It sends confirmations to let them know they're on track. Here's another line for the opposition to chew on. You didn't move too fast. They moved too slow. That's the real narrative, and it stings because it obliterates the illusion that you did something wrong. They weren't ready for you to mature without their blessing. They weren't ready for you to detach without bitterness. They weren't ready for you to win quietly. That's why diplomacy arrived late. That's why warnings ring hollow. That's why the messenger grinned instead of pleaded. He knew there was nothing left to negotiate.